Hello, Pennsylvania voters. Guess what? We did it! I honestly did not think that we would get to celebrate this quickly. I think everybody in the election integrity movement was just ready for a knockdown, drag out. No way this is going to get called quietly. And I was absolutely stunned that Tuesday night went the way that it did. But we're going to get into all of that. I am Tony Shoup, CEO of Audit the Vote. I'm joined with my two Patriot friends who would not be, we would not be here without both of them, especially Vico, who, if you're new to us, you probably don't know who Vico is. So we're so excited to get a chance to share him with you tonight. He is the brains behind the election integrity movement in Pennsylvania. He's been at this long before Karen and I were. We were just blessed to connect with him in early 2021, and he's been such a big part of this movement. So we're really excited and thankful that finally his hard work has paid off, and we have a lot more to do. We know, Vico, you need some rest. Please like, share, and subscribe this on whatever platform it is that you're watching. Yes, we're back on YouTube because we're trying to reach the masses. I saw so many things floating across my X feed today. I saw something that said Trump might put something in that would make big tech not be able to censor us. I'm not counting on it, that's for sure. We briefly got back onto Instagram, but Karen, of course, is in a 6-month ban on Facebook and owns our Facebook page and our Instagram page. And so we literally can't post on Instagram right now, which is insane. So like, share, subscribe. Feel free to give us a monthly donation if you can, because we are just getting started. I'm going to have Joel play a video. This is one of my favorite videos I have seen. It's 2 minutes. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't even know who did it. Came across my Twitter feed today and I fell in love, and I sent it to Joel and said, let's kick off with this video. So let's do the video, Joel.
How will we be remembered? Look at the opportunities before us.
This election really isn't about the left versus the right. It's about we the people choosing our government and the choice between freedom versus tyranny.
Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
What is going on here is deeper than politics. It is deeply spiritual. We are being called to rise above the hatred and the fear and the evil.
We need to remember above and beyond that we must love our neighbors, that we must treat other people as we hope to be treated.
You want to be a rebel? You want to be a hippie? You want to stick it to the man? Show up on your college campus and try calling yourself a conservative.
America is going to reach heights that it has never seen before. The future is going to be amazing!
Don't you want healthy children? Don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
The sweet emotion raining all over me. I come to you today as a former Democrat. I will be a first-time Trump voter tonight.
The people dreamed this country, and it's the people who are making America great again. Making that new.
Isn't that amazing? I love that video. I'm playing it everywhere. I can't get enough of it. Yes, we are live. Thank you, Joel, for reminding me. We are live on Telegram, learning how to get live on Telegram and Twitch, some of our new platforms that Joel's connecting us with for maximum reach. Because like Marissa has pointed out, Marissa, we got a lot of problems still. But Tuesday is a victory, and I don't want to speak for Karen or Vico, but I can probably they would agree with this. We have been punched in the face so many times over the last 4 years and beat down so much that we're just gonna take some time and celebrate a little tiny bit. We are very well aware we have a long road ahead of us and a ton of work, but dang, it's been brutal. And finally, I think I forgot how to win. I really forgot not how to win. I forgot what it felt like to win. Because Tuesday, I spent at least 24 hours in total PTSD mode thinking, did that really happen? Did that really happen? But anyway, I'm gonna shut up and let the other guys intro themselves. Let's start with Karen and then Vico give an intro, and everybody knows Karen, but still just Tuesday, quickly.
Tuesday, I was doing vocal, fielding reports. I literally didn't get off the phone most of the day. Being the chair of my committee, I actually did some poll greeting. I was at the poll, talked to a lot of voters, first-time voters. Actually, we had an 87% at my precinct turnout, which was awesome. I was really excited about that. But I mean, literally, I didn't get off the phone until probably like 10:30 that night. I didn't go to bed until 4 a.m. And then I had to wake up the next day to go volunteer at my kid's school at 6 a.m. And I haven't gotten sleep much since. So I think Vico and I both were kind of running on adrenaline, energy drinks, and a lot of coffee. So if I don't feel like myself tonight, it's because I'm a little bit tired.
I have to interject, Karen, before we let Vico. So Karen was accepting the celebration a little bit quicker than I did. I thought it would take me till January, honestly, to get it all emotional and really believe that any of this is happening. I talked to Karen on my way home from the Hampton, my poll watcher effort at like 10:30, and she was already crying. I was like, wow, this must
I was on with Neil Johnson and B. Hizzy and Mike Lindell came on. Mike's telling us about a county in Arkansas, Independence, Arkansas, that went to hand counting. I had Marcus D on. I was talking to CanCon. So when you have all those guys that are lifting you up, you're like, okay, I got this. So Neil was like getting really excited, and he's like, I don't want to give hopium, but he's getting me motivated. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, we actually have a shot. Oh my God, we have a shot.
That's why you were crying. I was just like, you cry. We are not out of the woods. No way, man.
You guys have to understand, the three of us for the last 4 years, we have had our nose to the ground. We've been kicked left and right. And Vico, I don't want to take all your time away, but I do want to say this real quickly. We had this guy in Lancaster, Carter Walker, who worked for the Lancaster paper. He now works for VoteBeat. And he tore apart our canvassing, found like a 0.5 or 0.4 discrepancy rate. And everybody has used that to discredit Audit the Vote, right? It's a teeny itty bitty margin. And what I love is that he called us a threat to democracy, and he called us election deniers. And then today, Mark Elias gets on Twitter and talks about how we're not accepting the results and there's still so many votes to count. And I was like, hey, Carter Walker, what about this threat to democracy, buddy? You're going to look at this as much as you're going to look at Audit the Vote? So that was fun today. I had to do it, and it was really awesome. So, Vico, all you.
It's nice to see some people that have tried to discredit the election integrity movement start to call for transparency and start to call for various things we've been calling for and slandered for doing. It was ironic to see Carter saying what he had said, considering everything over the last 4 years he's tried to discredit. So I know everyone on our stream, Audit the Vote, and the people we work with, we care about election integrity regardless of who wins, right? It was certainly a huge victory to see results that resembled an honest election on Tuesday. There's certainly fraud that occurs all along. Certainly Audit the Vote and the organizations we work with, we want to stop all the fraud. And so we're continually trying to find new things and uncover different plots and try to get transparency and kind of get to this gold standard where there isn't fraud. But all along, the goal was to shave enough of the fraud off so that natural turnout could overtake the rest. And so it was really satisfying to be able to, like 3 a.m. or something, finally say, I think this is in the bag. There were a couple of states I was watching very closely all night with a pretty good feeling watching the results come in, Pennsylvania being one of them. Michigan, another, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia, a lot of the swing states, the blue wall states. You could tell as they were reporting those states that something was a little off compared to 2020. They didn't just, have the numbers they needed, and it wasn't just a consistent proportion vote assignment throughout the night. So it was a weird thing seeing an election where you're like, oh wow, the numbers are kind of consistently going in a certain direction, like you might expect for an election. Still have a lot of questions and concerns about Arizona right now. I know there are races that haven't been called there. It's really weird when you see the top of the ticket go one way and then lower on the ticket go the opposite way. And that's what we're seeing with Carrie Lake's race compared to Trump's race. So it makes you think that there's some funny business going on, especially given the fact that I was following Arizona along with those other states pretty closely through election night. And for the longest time, at least an hour or two, it looked like there was only about 100 votes that separated the Democrat and Republican candidate. So for that to maintain that small of a margin for so long is a little unusual. Usually that trend breaks very quickly, but to stay within a 3-digit gap of the other candidate when there are millions of votes, it's kind of unusual. So, keep an eye on Arizona, pray for Arizona. The election integrity movement in Pennsylvania certainly played a huge role in the victory we saw in Pennsylvania here. Still have a lot of work to do, but, I think that without the big guy, without God being involved in this last election, I don't think that, even our best attempts would have made it across the finish line like we saw on Tuesday. So I think we're all very blessed.
So much.
We're a little tired, but I guess that's my take on things. I'm just very happy, and hopefully I'll be catching up on some sleep this weekend. That's the goal, at least.
Absolutely. Vico, tell your background. So we connected with him in around April-ish of 2021. He was Dr.
I'm just
Frank.
saying he's ours. He's on loan to everybody else, but he belongs to us. I'm just kidding.
Which we're going to talk about because Vico has worked tirelessly for Pennsylvania for years. From Audit the Vote's perspective, has refused to take a dime from us, which is going to change whether he likes it or not, because I'm learning how to raise money. But if you would like to contribute to a salary for Vico, go to auditthevotepA.com/donations, because he more than deserves it. Thankfully, Cause of America swooped him up, Mike Lindell's organization and Karen both, and provided them a place where they could do what they're good at and work and also pay their bills. But none of us are getting wealthy in this industry. We're here because our hearts are in the right place, but we have bills to pay. So we do appreciate the donations. And Vico, I'm definitely taking up a collection for Audit the Vote to be able to give him something, whether he wants it or not, because he's developed stuff that he honestly could have been out in the marketplace charging tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for, and he didn't. And every time Karen and I are like, you can get reimbursed for like something, gas, something. He's like, no, I'm fine. So anyway,
he was getting voter rolls every week and never even, granted, it's not a lot of money, but it adds up when you do it every week.
And the fact that
I'm appreciative of that, but it's all glory to God here and however I can contribute. But there are so many initiatives that I know Audit the Vote has wanted to undertake and we're planning, we can't talk about yet. Donating to Audit the Vote's a very worthy cause. Please consider doing that or buy some merch or use our MyPillow code. The money all goes to really good things. And I can honestly say that had the election been closer or some other things played out the way we thought it might play out, you would have seen a lot of that money going to good use almost immediately. So we're very blessed that we can put some of that towards the next 6 months and ultimately the next election and the midterms in 2 years. But absolutely, we can't do this without you. So, and I'll keep doing what I can on my end because God has blessed us all. So
yeah, he's not really on loan, Karen. That's not fair to say because he does so much he went from being our data guy that we kind of like co-opted and scooped up to the data guy for the entire country. So every state, he's looking at every state. He's working with grassroots. So is Karen. She's fostering the relationships and forming those. And Vico's doing the data crunching and the number crunching. And if for those that have been following us for a while, if you saw the November 7th, 2023 issue that we found where Carolyn Carluccio, a Republican Supreme Court judge candidate, happened to lose 350,000 votes from her in-person vote total at 9:46 p.m. at night, that is because Vico wrote a software program a year prior for the Mastriano election when we saw something funky happening on the State Department website to scrape the results every 5 minutes. So it would essentially be if you were sitting at your computer, refresh every 5 minutes and writing down what you saw. He wrote a program that did it automatically. And that's what we discovered November 7th of 2023. Of course, the campaign, nobody wanted to look at it. We beat down enough doors a week later to get the Gateway Pundit to do an article. And then our state GOP was forced to acknowledge that it was legitimate. And they did exchange some letters with our State Department. So all of that is now on record. And that is just one of the many things, countless things that Vico has contributed to through Audit the Vote since we met him. So there's my soapbox. I told him he hates when we gush on him. And by the way, ladies, he's single. So, you know, you have to go through me and Karen. We're kind of big sister-ish. We have very high standards.
Resumes.
Resumes, welcome. Very high standards for him, but he is single. And then Joel will kill me if I don't tell you that our producer, Joel, who you don't see much up front, but we will get you photos, he is also available. So maybe that at some point this will function as kind of a dating service, but not really.
Dating service on it.
not really. I love Vico. Our hearts are aligned when he's giving credit to God. A lot of you guys don't see behind the scenes that we meet with our county leads, people that we connected with and got on the ground and rolled their sleeves up just like us, and on a volunteer basis just went at things and said, I want to fix things in my backyard. And we kind of found them along the way one at a time. And we have been meeting every Sunday night. We have kind of we call it our county lead meeting. It's at least an hour, sometimes 2, sometimes longer than that, for years, at least 2 years. We've been meeting every Sunday night, and every Sunday night we close with prayer. And I absolutely, the God gets all the honor and all the glory, because the issues that are potential within the systems themselves, electronically and otherwise, that could subvert an election are still there. A couple of measures we were able to get through, which I'll have these guys talk about a little bit more. Act 88 that the Senate passed before the midterms, that definitely contributed to them not being able to dump ballots. But by and large, the vulnerabilities are still there. And so if you had asked me 3 months ago what I thought Pennsylvania was going to turn out to be, I was 50-50. I was really not sure, because I knew how much still needed fixed and how much hadn't changed. But without a doubt, the Lord granted us mercy and gave us a miracle. And it's not that we're all Trumpers and MAGA, and we so strongly believe the majority really wanted him and that he was subverted in 2020, that it's finally what Vico said, the turnout was able to reflect the will of the people. And our canvassing effort absolutely proves that. But if you could, Vico, Captain TLB, which is I'm seeing like my own thing, ask questions on here, which is really weirding me out because my Facebook was hacked. What the heck is that? You guys see that, Captain TLB in the chat? Which article? Oh, the Gateway Pundit.
Yeah.
It's Joel, okay. Look up Gateway Pundit, Carolyn Carluccio, Supreme Court. Thank God, Joel, you're freaking me out. It was November. It was the week after November 7th, the municipal election there. The Gateway Pundit did an article. Yep. Sean Parnell shared it. That's, I think, the influencer that made it go viral. It ended up getting shared like 3 or 4 million times on Twitter. Our Rumble channel, we didn't have YouTube at the time. It got over 100,000 views on Rumble, and they couldn't ignore it anymore. So when we say we live in the court of public opinion, there's a reason, because number one, we didn't have the money to play in the actual courts. And number two, even if we did, we found they're largely corrupt. So we just decided to make some noise and get on the ground and do what we thought we were good at. And thankfully, we have really good, strong data to back us up in Vico. But I want you to tell them a little bit about your background, because we learned more about this. We didn't know each other 4 years ago. The 2020 election.
A God thing, Tony? Let me talk about that, because for Tony and I, look, Tony's background is in nuclear engineering. My background's medical administration. Now, granted, Vico does have a data background, but for us to even get connected to Vico, Tony messaged him on Facebook. Like, it wasn't even like somebody was like, hey, you guys need to meet. Tony literally stalked him on Facebook. But what's
let me back up, because Dr. Frank, remember, hold on, there is like the thin thread. Karen and I were doing Patriot. 100%. Totally. Constitution classes, Patriot Academy. Karen and I were hosting Constitutional Live. We were promoting it at the Cracked Egg in Pittsburgh. Kim Wigan was kind enough to open her doors to us before anyone knew us and give us a platform to get signatures.
Right.
Her business had been shut down. The restaurant had been all kind of health fines and supposed violations from the COVID because she called BS on that crap and left her restaurant open and wouldn't force people to wear masks. And I was there promoting the Constitution class where a guy sat me down right before I left and said, "You've got to meet this guy, Dr. Frank." And I was like, what the heck? Who the heck is Dr. Frank? So I got connected with Dr. Frank on Facebook. One conversation with Dr. Frank, he mentions this guy, and Dr. Frank calls him Vico. So that's the big debate too. Is his name is spelled Vico? Is it Vico? Is it Vico? We did enough research, Vico, and you tell us otherwise. But Karen and I found out that you prefer Vico, so that's why I've been calling you that ever since. If it's not, you let us know.
Totally fine. Either are acceptable. It upsets people when I say either or. If you want to be Italian, you over enunciate, so you say Vico with your hand, and my last name's not any easier. So I take both. I've been called much worse over the last 8 years. So those are both very nice, endearing names. I'll take either.
So Dr. Frank called him Vico, and obviously it's kind of a unique name. He wasn't hard to find on Facebook. How many Vicos live in the state of Pennsylvania? Wasn't hard. Quick Facebook search, connected with him, stalked him, and the rest, like Karen, take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm just saying. The thin threads that God has really kind of intertwined all three of us together. And we're so thankful for that, because without Vico, the two of us are just two talking heads and moms who just like to talk a lot. And so Vico has really kind of given the data behind Audit the Vote, and really, I feel like, given us some credibility, because it does give us, something to talk about that's not just, we're upset and we're just going to talk about being upset. So glory to God for sure, but a lot of to Vico.
Amen. And I have to mention, we had a third lady with us at the time who was largely responsible for building this movement. Her name is Jamie. A lot of you might remember her. She didn't stay with us for more than a year and a half, but she was an integral part of getting Audit the Vote off the ground. She traveled all over the state and getting signatures for the petition, speaking at events. Because Karen and I, at the time, our kids were little. Karen's kids were like, Graham was a baby. Wasn't he like a year old or something? Or
he was almost a year when we got started, and my daughter was almost 3.
So my youngest was 2. We had little kids. Jamie's kids were a little bit older, so she had a little more freedom to travel. So she was traveling all over the state while Karen and I were still wiping butts and feeding faces with our little ones. And so we have to give credit where credit is due. We would not have gotten the following without her pounding the pavement. So thank you, Jamie, if you're watching out there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you, and we hope things are going well for you. So that Vico, your background. I know we learned more about Vico, his background. He started telling me one time about the WikiLeaks that he was involved in 2016, all the Hillary Clinton emails. And I started to have this understanding, like, wow, this dude's knowledge of politics and the government corruption goes back way further than Karen and I were even awake. And you talked about it one time. I just wanted you to share your background. How did you get into political arena?
Yeah, it's an area I don't think most of us ever wanted to be in. 2015 was an eye-opener for me. I graduated college a couple years prior, and for the longest time was very apolitical. You look at what happens in the government and with the debt and everything else, and you think, all right, I must not be able to understand this. We elect all these people, they're supposed to be fixing it. If they can't figure it out, these things that sound really good, don't do it, then I'm not informed enough. I'm not going to jump in. But in 2015, I think that WikiLeaks had shared some really interesting stuff that started getting me to read into the emails and also start thinking about some of these things that, if you look at just like the title of a bill, it sounds really good. But when you start to see the repercussions of it, and you even go and you start reading it, some of these bills are massive. So it's really not something you can quickly read through. But if you page through some of it, you start to realize why it doesn't work like the title suggests, like the Affordable Care Act, which caused many people's insurances to go way up and the selection of available insurers to go way down. And we see this time and time again. But the 2015, 2016, technically election cycle, but it started in the primaries for me, was something that I saw a couple of candidates saying how things just don't work. Trump being one of them, and of all people, Bernie being another. And so it was really interesting to me. And at the time I was working at a tech company. My background's in software. I've done a ton of analytics, and in the last, 8 years, a ridiculous amount of data work as well. Um, so I'm in a very liberal field. I'm working with a ton of Democrats. So they're all trying to get me involved because they want another vote. And I'm hearing some of their reasoning for things. And I'm learning very quickly how much I despise Hillary and how ingenuine she is and how awful her past is. That when I'm hearing some of the reasons people are doing things, it baffles my mind. And I think in my naive younger self, that people just don't have the time to kind of do the research themselves and like really understand a candidate or an issue. So I'm a young guy. I have more time. I start to do some of the research myself, and I start to see like, they're saying things that are not true whatsoever, and they're getting away with it. And so I try to convince some of these people, and of course they don't listen. But the WikiLeaks stuff was really powerful, and I almost got addicted to like researching that stuff with a bunch of other people, anonymous people on the internet. And I will say it was a lot easier when you're just totally anonymous. You can like go to bed when you want, and you don't have a ton of requests in the morning. You're just, so it was a lot easier to just like dig through tens of thousands of emails, which I think, by the time that 2016 cycle was over, I probably scanned through 10,000 plus emails to read them and created like, I collected a lot of the really incriminating ones that were released, and helped to kind of read, research, and share them as they came up. There were a handful around Scalia and his death that were incredibly incriminating. There were also a lot of other emails in there that were very incriminating. But I started to realize very quickly, like, politics is pretty ugly, and it
Did you
might
find the
not.
hot dogs one, Vico? That wasn't you, was it?
Yeah, no, well, I didn't find it, but I wasn't the guy that discovered it first. But I did validate that Obama spent with like $50,000 or something ridiculous on hot dogs for the White House.
Okay.
Yeah, we can speculate what that means, but there are some weird emails in there, believe me. So it pissed me off, right? So like anyone's delve into politics, you're either pissed off and you want to fix things, or you want power. And I could care less about power or recognition. It's really not why I'm in this. I prefer neither. But it pissed me off. I'm like, okay, they're clearly just wasting money and lying, and there's all these issues. So I helped to get some of that stuff out. I was following the Bernie Clinton primary very closely because I knew that I did not want Hillary to be president. I knew how bad it would be. The emails that are being exchanged, you can see where she's being told not to use a private email server and she does it anyway. You can see where she's told that her private email server in her basement was hacked. She's using it anyway. Just time and time again, where you can see she's like setting this up to easily give classified information to our adversaries. And so I'm like really agitated. I'm like, this is absurd that she's gotten away with all of this. So the primary happens, and Bernie got backstabbed pretty bad. I don't think Hillary won that with the numbers she did. Tulsi Gabbard, who was, I guess she was co-chair of the DNC at the time, she stepped down because it was so bad. Bernie, they say Bernie folded like a lawn chair, which yeah, absolutely agree with. He, went in line and toted Hillary.
Do you think he was paid off? Do you think they paid him off?
I don't know. I think threatened. I think he showed up with a black eye at the DNC convention, if I remember correctly. So, it's all the same. It doesn't matter if he was bribed, threatened, or blackmailed, but he gave in to the machine. And so I got a really interesting request. And it's one of those things where like, you're putting the emails out anonymously, you're doing work on the internet, you're doing this research. Someone asked me to look into the New York primary that year because the Democrat primary, they got a ton of reports that there were people who went in to vote and they were told they aren't registered to vote and so on and so forth. And I was given a New York voter roll, which is huge compared to Pennsylvania. It's like, over twice the size. And so I looked at it. And I found a day that it looked like there were some fairly massive purges that occurred, which was relatively speaking close to the primary. And so I found it. I'm like, oh gosh, this is disturbing. I gave it to the group. I don't know that anything significant came from that other than, they tried to bang on the drum and they were ignored by the Clinton machine and the DNC, which she had, total control of at the time. And so I thought that's, totally weird to happen. I'll never do this again. And I kind of just went about my merry way. I got really involved in trying to get Trump across the finish line. For me, it was however I can prevent Hillary from getting in, because I saw all the awful things in her emails. And I'm like, this is not somebody who should have any bit of power. And then Trump got elected, which I was incredibly happy for. That was the first election I voted in, because I was like, beforehand, I was like, I don't know enough to vote. And so I cast my first one for Trump, which was amazing. I went home that night. I was hanging out with some friends, went home, watched the results. I can't tell you how happy I was at like 2 a.m. when it was called for him. I was like giddy and, super satisfying and almost silly. A lot of people can probably relate because of Tuesday, but I went into work the next day, and believe me, I said it earlier, my coworkers were ready to make fun of me for weeks on end when Hillary got elected. Like they were coming over to me every day saying, "Oh, Madam President," and all that fun stuff. So they were all sick. They all got the cold on election night and couldn't come in the next day. So there were like 3 of us in the office, all giggling in our own little corners, and then go over to lunch. And we're like, hey, he did it, this, that, and the other thing. So that was pretty satisfying. But I kind of took it upon myself then to get involved at the local level, because I was like, all right, I understand enough, and we need to move the needle. There's this momentum behind this movement. People are really upset. They're disenfranchised. I tried debating and trying to bring people to our viewpoint, very unsuccessfully in most cases, because believe it or not, Antifa, they just don't care. They're not going to listen to an honest argument or do any research on their own. So had a couple of Trump rallies I attended that they showed up, and I can tell you confidently, I don't think I converted any of them, even though I tried talking to them, and they tried to kill me a couple times. So that's always fun. I say kill loosely, attack, jump, dox, throw a brick through a window kind of thing. Who knows where it would have ended up, but got continually more involved in a couple of campaigns, ran for school board in 2019 unsuccessfully, was a part of a U.S. congressional campaign in 2020 when COVID happened. And, it's like, okay, here's another crazy thing that they're saying one thing and the facts are a little different. So after the first month when the data came out, I ran the numbers and I realized they are really inflated in Pennsylvania. And it makes sense because look at these mandates. They're sending the elderly who catch COVID back to the nursing homes. We were one of 5 states that did that. So that really pissed me off. I was working with the Kathy Barnett campaign. As soon as I had those numbers, a month in, I was like, here are the numbers. We need to get this out. And we did. We made it a huge talking point on that campaign. It drew a ton of people in. Montgomery County, I think it was 93 or 95% of all of our deaths were from nursing homes, which is incredibly sad. But they used that as justification for all these other draconian measures. So, I poured a ton of effort into that campaign. I do really think that she had won. All the numbers going into election night for both her and Trump in the 2020 cycle looked good. And then we saw numbers that really, I don't think we'll ever see again, where an imaginary 20 million people that no longer vote showed up and created this, impenetrable wall to give Biden 81 million votes. So, the next day I was planning to catch up on sleep, kind of in the similar situation, although I think I will this time. Was like, okay, we need to get to the bottom of what happened. So, I'd been working data on the campaign previously. I started with that race, that district, ended up launching the second nationwide canvassing effort for the 2020 election in Montgomery County, where we saw it was and I apologize. It's been 4 years. The numbers are going to be off by a percentage or two. Don't write an article, Carter.
And that's not our canvassing effort that he gave us a number. This was
Different
something,
effort.
yes, he did way before us.
So this is just Montgomery County. We mobilized, I want to say it was like 100 people. We knocked on, I want to say a couple thousand doors in the span of like 7 days. I was literally up until like 3 a.m. every night, checking the data from the previous day and then generating new walk lists for people. It was a pretty intense week. We got that out. We saw the discrepancy rate. It wasn't ever publicized the way I think it should have been, which is a shame. But that is what it is. So I was, for a little while trying to see what else I could do. I started looking at the statewide results and the statewide voter rolls, along with some other people at the time. I was still working with Kathy, and I thought, I'm a younger guy. I don't have like fancy credentials, and I also don't have like the decades and decades of like institutional background that would come with like a Dr. Frank. And we had actually connected with Dr. Frank during her campaign over the COVID numbers. So I suggested to Kathy, like, hey, I see all these issues, right? Some of these things I can't tell you the full significance of. Like, we need another set of eyes on this to confirm that like what I'm looking at and how I'm approaching these things are accurate. So we called Dr. Frank. Dr. Frank, Dr. Frank, he was like, ooh, data. And so he was like really happy. We connected. He was looking at the voter data without seeing any of the canvassing stuff or results. And we tasked him with trying to see through his own methodology what how many people on the Pennsylvania District 4 list were phantoms, were not real, how many votes there were. And he used the census and some other things. And he came to, I think it was like a percentage point off, 1 or 2 percentage points off from what we had gotten previously. We're like, okay, so there's something here, right? Dr. Frank and I tried to work with the legislature. We were really optimistic, and I know Dr. Frank has told this story a bunch of times, but we learned really quickly that was a dead end. Unfortunately, some of the people in leadership behind closed doors were yelling about how they don't want to look back at the election that just happened. They just want to look forward, and so on and so forth. So we realized that, unfortunately, we weren't going to be able to get anything done there. And so I think it was only like a month or so where I was like, I don't really know what to do, maybe 2 months. I'm kind of doing election integrity stuff. I'm kind of doing political stuff. I don't really know where I'm going. And I get, I don't know if it was the Facebook message first or a call from Dr. Frank, but I got two within pretty close timing of one another, from Tony, and then, Dr. Frank saying, hey, there's this lady out in Western Pennsylvania you should connect with. So
he might have given you a fair warning. I was just impatient, Vico, and that's why I found you. I think he even told me, like, I don't know if this guy wants to be like out front in public or whatever. So let me connect. He probably called you, but I was just impatient and stalked you. So
I don't remember the order, anymore. It's like a couple of weeks ago. I forget what I was doing, unless it's a significant thing. Like, oh yeah, I ran the state, or we found this thing. It's blurred a lot just given the scale of the things we're doing. So, yeah, I mean, from there, it's been a wild ride. I've been very blessed to work with the two of you. And there are so many, very patriotic people that are also in this movement that, many of them don't want recognition. They want to stay behind the scenes. They do a ton of work. So shout out to them. Shout out to the people that, because they didn't have any other choice, they're doing a ton of work and their name is out there. So, we're just very blessed. I'm very lucky to have run into the people I have. And this is a really unique movement, I'll say. A lot of people are in it for the right reasons. Usually with politics, it's money or ego that drive things. But there are a ton of people that would rather not be doing this, but feel very driven to do it. So I think that is the sense of humor God has, because most of us are in that boat. So anyway, that's enough about my background. Hopefully that is complete enough, but if you have questions, of course I can answer them.
Yeah, that's really good. No, we learned something. I learned something more about him and his background every time I ask. And I'm a story person, storyteller. I love stories. And so as you can see, I could just listen for days. But Vico, a couple of things you mentioned I wrote down that I saw. You're absolutely right on the nursing home issue in COVID. You know, I believe they purposely did that so that they could have an easier time subverting the election. And I just saw today, I love this vindication. I would say vindicated is probably the best word to describe how I feel after Tuesday, because the Daily Wire just circulated something that they found through public records requests. It looks like a FEMA official giving a list of protocols and saying specifically to avoid offering help to Trump houses, any houses that had Trump signs. Did you guys see that?
I did
Like,
not.
how disturbing. Seriously.
Yeah.
So no doubt that in my mind anyway, that was targeted and planned, and that they were purposely trying to hurt people in Montgomery County. But all of that stuff he went through, just keep in mind, was before we met him. He was doing all of that work before we even connected together. And of course, then when we did get connected and we saw what he could provide us in terms of data, he gave us all of the door knocking efforts. We knocked 12 counties. We knocked doors starting in the summer of 2021, going into the fall, and then even finishing up in the early part of 2022. And we were refining things. He was giving us lists that were based on, you know, let's give you, I think our first list we did, Vico, was Lancaster, and half of them were suspect addresses and the other half were chosen at random. And it was like, let's just go see what we find. But then he was able to pinpoint, the closer we got, I think, to the fall, he was able to pinpoint where he thought there might be issues. And we got to a point where we had a piece of paper that when we went to the door, we could show it to the person that answered the door and said, these are the people that are registered to vote here. Can you confirm any of this, or is this accurate? And they were able to look at it and be like, I don't know. That was the previous owner, hasn't been here in 2 years. Definitely don't know who those 3 people are. Those 2 are my kids. They're in college. They definitely don't vote here. And it got, the more we canvassed, the more doors we knocked, the more glaringly obvious the 2020 steal became. And so even though our efforts for the audit got yanked out from under us in the summer of 2021, when Senator Mastriano was removed from his committee, we thought that was our ticket. He was going to send the subpoenas through the Senate, and we were going to get answers to this. And Lindell, that first cyber symposium, Vico, I can't remember. We probably did try to drag you to that. I don't know if you had rush yet or what, why you couldn't come. I'm sure you got invited from their end too, but that cyber symposium in the summer, I remember Lindell saying, we're going to get Trump back in the White House. And we wholeheartedly believed that because of it was so obvious to us from what we were finding on the ground. And that's what kept us going, is because we were meeting people eyeball to eyeball that were saying, I didn't vote in 2020. Right. And we're like, but here, there's a ballot that was credited to you according to the certified results. Something is wrong. And the more people that knocked doors with us and saw that, the bigger the movement got, because you can't unsee some of this stuff once you see how bad it is. And Vico, can you talk a little bit, and then Karen, maybe chime in too. I see we've been unburdened by what has been. Oh my gosh, I'm so like, come on.
So glad we never have to hear that again.
Good grief. What are some of the most egregious things, Vico, that you've seen since going with Cause of America and getting to see nationwide data? Because I know Pennsylvania is bad, but every state has issues. What are some of the biggies in other states?
Yeah, it's you start to appreciate what you have more. There are definitely issues in Pennsylvania's voter rolls. Some states, I don't know if like they have a bunch of monkeys or like babies in a room and they're the ones maintaining the voter rolls, but they're like totally awful. They're missing key data points. There's serious issues within them. So like, Pennsylvania isn't the best. Pennsylvania has issues, but and we're not as open as like a North Carolina is, or several other states which offer it for free. I just got Nevada's data. Nevada you can get for free whenever you want. So there are all these states that have all these nice things, and there are states that have like additional data points which are really important. Like, why is your status the status it is? And so you can see that like they've passed away or there's some other issue. And Pennsylvania has these data points, but they just don't make them available, which is crazy. But then there are states that are missing key data points because they, for whatever reason, don't want you to be able to perform meaningful oversight. But I think, the thing that I've seen, think I have something like 250 million voter records or something in most of the states. So there's a lot of overlap. We're able to track that fairly well using the post office, which there are alternatives that we can find more matches, but the significance here, there is federal law, the National Voter Registration Act, 52 U.S. Code 20,507. If you go and you look that up, you'll see why it's important to use this, because it's actually required that the states are doing this. And they need to be doing this program, which is defined in this federal law, which is just the minimum standard of regular list maintenance. They need to be doing this and completing it no later than 90 days prior to each election. So there's some standard that says, hey, look for dead people, look for people that moved, specifically for the people that moved, use the post office data to find them. Here are some steps you have to take. You mail them a letter, you either get it back, they say they live there, or that you don't, and then you make them inactive. And there's this really long process where, sometimes it can take 8 years for somebody who it doesn't exist to be canceled. So when you start to look at like a state like Pennsylvania, we have something like 300,000 people that have moved to another state. And some of these people moved 2 years ago, meaning there were maybe 3 or 4 federal elections since then where they should have been cleaned up and they should have been removed, but they weren't. So, they've moved to a new state permanently. And with all this data, what's really amazing is we can actually find them in the new state. And we use a really strict matching criteria to do this. So the concept of casting a wide net to get big numbers, that's not what we're doing. We're casting a very narrow net where we're looking basically for identical matches when we're doing this. So we can see whether or not somebody has registered in their new state, which is one of the qualifiers to cancel a registration sooner. And so, we're able to find, I think we have something like 100,000 of these. We've confirmed they're registered in the new state, where they moved to. And we've tried so many things to try to address that in Pennsylvania. But seeing those kinds of numbers, it makes sense why there is such a large credit line or phantom votes or excess votes in the 2020 election. I think in total, there are about 30 million people I'm tracking, give or take, that show that they're registered in a state and they've moved within the last 4 years. The numbers are much higher. Like I said earlier, there are other services that provide you address verification and identity verification. When we start to look at that stuff, the 2 to 3%, maybe 5 at the most, discrepancy rate of moves that the post office provides, because it's just a 4-year window, we're actually able to get that up to about 10%. We've seen it as high as 40%, where 40% of the names we're looking at in some of these states and some of these more rural areas, especially, or really populous areas, 40% of the people are not living at the address that they're registered at, which is crazy. So it shows the thing that, going into, and I expected some states to be doing better, but really they all have some level of issues. And part of it's because of the federal law under NVRA, which if states aren't following it and they're not being consistent with how they're applying the minimum standard of list maintenance, then you're going to end up with a lot of these anomalies where they forget to send the letter out. And then because there's just such a small window with the post office, they forgot to send that letter, or they forgot to put the person inactive. 5 years go by, that person's still active. The post office won't tell them again that they moved because they're no longer on that 4-year radar. So it's pretty eye-opening once you start to see that, when you see such high discrepancy rates, and you see just with the federally mandated minimum, these discrepancy rates. Pennsylvania is one of the states with a lot more people that should be cleaned up, right? We're not at the bottom of that list. I wish we were. Part of the
Which is probably why, Vico, your disdain for mail ballots, because you're literally living in this data from the Postal Service, seeing how wildly inaccurate it is. And yet we have to listen to people saying, mail your ballot, and it's fine.
We see that. There was somebody in Texas who, this cycle, they requested a mail ballot from Pennsylvania sent to Texas. And guess what? They were registered in Texas. and they showed a move from the post office to that address in Texas. And so we had the county call them up, and they were like, "Hey, are you living in Texas? Yeah. Are you living there permanently? Yeah. Did you register to vote in Texas? Yeah. Why are you requesting a mail ballot from Pennsylvania?" Right? So, like, you're not allowed to do that, and you certainly can't vote in more than one state. And we've seen that too. And I want to be clear. We've seen cases, and these tend to be lesser, of somebody saying, "Yeah, I voted in 2 elections. So what?" And you'll see the stories here and there, like someone's arrested because that's a felony for those that don't know, but they committed a felony in voting in the same election in multiple states. But more times than not, and this is the disturbing thing, this is what we saw in a little bit of our canvassing, because you have people saying, "No, they don't live here. They don't live here." But we also had people saying, "I didn't vote. Why does it show a vote for me?" Or, "Where is my vote?" Right? And so what was really concerning, I think, in all of this, we see these massive numbers at 30 million or so that we identify just from the federally required sources. Um, when you actually start to canvass these people, they're shocked. They're like, "I did not cast a vote in that state. I absolutely did not. I didn't know I was registered still." People are expecting that, like, the states are doing what they're supposed to do. And so I'm glad to hear that, Nikki. That's what should happen, but it doesn't happen consistently. And sometimes it happens, but the process just isn't followed through. But that's what should happen.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that letter came from a nonprofit, not actually the county itself, but there's other groups like ours that took this initiative upon themselves to send those letters to people that lived in other states so that they could remove themselves from the voter rolls. So
Yeah.
I digress.
Kudos to them. Yeah, absolutely. Great organizations, good people behind them. If it was from the state, it probably was from a better county, right? It also is by county. Philadelphia has like 50,000, I think, of the like 300,000 out of state people. They are our biggest county, sure, but that's a huge number of votes, right? If you look at how close the McCormick Casey race is, 50,000, that's pretty big. So, that's probably the most concerning thing, just seeing how the roles are kind of not maintained to the minimum level that is required by federal law. And that minimum level isn't good enough. It wouldn't be acceptable in any other industry. If you tried to pull that in the financial industry or pharmaceutical or any other industry, that would not fly. The entire system would be taken apart and remade so that there was a higher level of accuracy. So, that's probably the most concerning thing, I'd say. Pennsylvania's roles have a lot of issues. Some states are good. No state is perfect. What we really would love is decentralized roles. So that way there isn't just, a state program that can make these changes. Some of these counties don't even know these changes are in place. And in addition to the decentralized roles, what we also really need is improved list maintenance requirements. So, given that Congress seems to be going Republican, and we also would have the president, I'm very hopeful that some of these things can be addressed, because I think NVRA created a situation where it's very hard, even if you're following all the list maintenance requirements, to really have accurate rolls.
That's what I was going to, my next question, Vico, was do you think that repealing the NVRA would help, would hurt, or should we just make some changes and amendments to it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the concept is not awful, but it either needs to be removed and remade or amended. Biggest things for me, obviously, there's the list maintenance not being strict enough. I think that if I were to go to like my dream versus like the happy medium, I think it would be fine if every state had to clear their voter rolls once a year. So after a general election, like December or January, let's say, the rolls are reset and you then need to re-register. If you can't find 10 minutes within 360 days to register, then probably you shouldn't be voting. And that would catch a lot of the issues of people who squeaked by, their social security is wrong, or they're not a citizen, or there's some issue where they were ineligible. They passed away, they moved, whatever. So it would catch those things if they were forced to do it at least once a year. So that's like, a dream, oh, wow, that'd be great. I don't know that there's an appetite for that, but at a minimum, I think there's a real issue. Once you confirm that somebody is not in your state anymore, I don't know why they're on the rolls for 4 more years. That really should be a quicker process. And you shouldn't need to miss 4 general elections to have some letter sent to you asking whether or not you're still in the state. If they're able to identify it, you've moved sooner.
Totally agree. Could not agree more. Karen, what are your thoughts on the NVRA Act and also HAVA? I'd love to hear from both of you about that, because the Help America Vote Act is causing a lot of problems that we found as well over the last 4 years. Now that we have potentially Republican House with people that might have an appetite to fix some of this stuff, where do you think we could go federally to fix some stuff?
Well, I think Eric needs to go. That's the first thing. That's got to go bye-bye. It's not doing anything but more harm than good. But, I think the problem is the states themselves aren't maintaining their voter rolls. And we've seen that in Pennsylvania. That I think is one of the biggest problems that we have here is, the 200,000 plus, and that's probably being conservative people that are still on our voter rolls that don't even live here anymore. And so trying to figure out a way to actually get the counties to do their job, which will make our job a lot easier too. But nationwide, Vico can attest to this too. We've seen this issue in every state. The voter rolls are dirty in every single state. And so trying to figure out if they're going to continue with the legislation on cleaning up their voter rolls, there needs to be actual penalties instead of the junk that they're doing now and not holding people accountable. So I think that's the first issue that we have to figure.
Whoop, did she freeze for you?
Alabama. Did I freeze?
For a second, but you're back.
Okay.
You're good.
So like Alabama, it's what, Vico, $25,000, I think, to get their voter rolls in Alabama. Yeah.
Wisconsin, Virginia, I think they're all 5-digit costs.
Thousands of dollars to get their voter rolls. And so, of course, average everyday people like us who are actually trying to do good can't get access to that material. And so I think that's something that also needs to be reformed because, these are our elections. We pay for them. There's no reason why the people shouldn't be able to get that information. Pennsylvania, along with a lot of other states, we can't get ballot images. We can't get cast vote records. And, if they want people to trust the elections, we have to be able to get that material, right? We have to be able to see transparency. And so all in all, I think that's a lot of things that we really need to look at reforming because otherwise we're going to continue on. I mean, there are people who I think are now not happy with the results from Tuesday. And now they're starting to look back at what happened in 2020 and they're like, oh, well, those numbers don't add up to the years prior to that. So maybe there was something to 2020. And so, yes, I think it's great that it's opening people's eyes, but the fact that you're going to have another 4 years of one side or the other not happy with the results and not believing the results are true because there's no transparency there. So I know I feel like a broken record, but the only way we're going to get back there is by one day voting, hand count, hand marked paper ballots. And really the hand counting, the machines got to go. And, we did it for hundreds of years. It was fine. And here's what's funny. Cambria County, and I think Columbia County, they're still counting ballots. They're still counting ballots.
But wait, what did they have?
In counting class, they probably would have figured it out by now.
What they were basically, correct me if I'm wrong, Cambria was forced to hand count because of issues with the machines.
They were forced to hand count because they couldn't get the machines right. And now, because they're slow walking it, they're still hand counting. But what's funny is that, I mean, look at some of these other states that are still counting by machines that aren't hand counting, but then they complain to us that, oh, we can't hand count because it's going to take forever. What's the difference?
Can I just say to Cambria County and the other counties, if they took Karen's hand counting class, they would have been done by now. So
we would have been done the same time they called the presidency.
Reach out. She'd probably be more than happy to teach you. And it's a super efficient method. I think, there have been some studies done on it and, how quick per ballot is it, Karen? Do you have that offhand? I know Linda put
So
something
I
together.
remember when we did it at the Capitol, there was 27 races on the ballot, and it was 1 minute and 2 seconds. I think Commissioner DeBello timed it when we did it at the Capitol, and that was 27 races.
That's amazing. Karen Barsoon, I think she's the election director in Chester County, if I remember her position correctly. She was quoted this cycle saying it takes several minutes per mail ballot to count it. Several minutes. I want to throw it out to Karen Barsoon as well. Get in touch with Karen. Takes 27 races. That's a lot quicker, and probably you save a ton of money because you don't need the $1 million machines every couple of years.
And that is one of the big things that we're going to ramp up here going into 2025 is working with Joel and getting Karen to do the training, get modules up on our website that'll have to be very passcode protected. We don't want this information getting in the wrong hands. Certainly don't want the media accessing it, but getting it in a digestible format where, 10, 15-minute segments breaking down the process so that anybody at their leisure can go on and learn how to hand count ballots in Pennsylvania, because she's learned a ton about our state statutes and the way that we have to kind of tweak Linda Rantz's method, her Missouri method, that she's kind of the pioneer of this particular method with Cause of America, did a ton of work, 300-page e-manual, tons and tons of research have gone into this, but it's actually being implemented on the ground in Missouri. So we can tell confidently our states that there are states that are using this with success. They're actually saving money because it's cheaper to do this than it is to renew the machines with the maintenance and the contracts and all the upkeep there. And so that's one of the many initiatives that as we regroup over the holidays and figure out really where's the best place to put our efforts in the next year or two to affect change and really get us closer to transparency. That's the whole idea is if you don't have transparency in the vote counting and the vote reporting process, those are the two big areas right now of our system that are most vulnerable. Is that I was just talking to my boss, Rick Green, yesterday, actually. He came on my Constitution class. And I guess in Texas, I don't know the ins and outs as well, I'm sure, as he does, but they must vote on a touch screen, and then they get a piece of paper with a barcode that gets scanned into a tabulator. Well, he ran for the state legislature in the early 90s when they were at least still filling out a paper ballot. So his stance was, well, if we just fill out the paper ballot, then we can count that. And what I was able to share with him is that, Rick, we did that, and we have that in Pennsylvania. The problem is they won't let us count them that way. I mean, we've been fighting this battle for 2 years. We spent, thanks to your generous donations, $30,000 back in 2022 to try to at least confirm that the Mastriano-Shapiro governor race was legitimate. Nobody trusts these machines. We didn't want to spend the next 2 years thinking that Shapiro's an illegitimate governor. So we wanted to take a look at the ballots ourselves and hand count them. And we found a way in the statute to fill out a petition, deployed people in 33 counties. We filed these petitions to try to get our hands on the paper, and every single one of them denied us that, even though the statute says that the ballots shall be counted by persons. Every single time they granted the hand count, they forced us to put them right back through the same machines, which is, there's absolutely no point. So if we can't get transparency in the counting, and then the other piece is the reporting process, which is something that what Vico found. Joe, I don't know if you were able ever to get the Gateway Pundit article that they wrote from November 7th, 2023 issue that Vico was able to pinpoint. That's another area, if you did throw it up there, if not, don't worry about it. That's another area that is shrouded in mystery, that we'd have no idea once those USB sticks are dropped off at our county election office, what happens to the results, because our ballots, our votes are on those sticks, and nobody has any clue how they get from whatever computer they're inserted in at the county level to the State Department where it's reported, and then ultimately to the media. And so there is tons of work to be done. We are truly just getting started. As exhausted as we are, I think it is invigorating, though, to feel somewhat vindicated. I don't know exactly what bullshizzle. I see that, Nikki. I don't know where the count is right now. Do either of you two know what the total? I mean, it's glaringly obvious, the 2020. Where did these missing votes go? Where's it at right now?
I actually, if Joel will pull it up, I did give Joel, and we're going on the opposite side to see the reporting, but New York Times has the reporting right now for the McCormick-Casey race, and they have it by county. And so what they're supposedly waiting on is Cambria County, I think, is at, 81%, 88%. And then Cameron County is 68%. So that's what they're waiting on right now for the totals, and why Even Al Schmidt, the Republican Secretary of State, saying there's still over 100,000 ballots to count, so we can't call the race yet. Can't call it.
Unbelievable.
Tony, we do have a video, though. If we can't find the Gateway Pundit article, you guys can look on the Audit the Vote Rumble channel if you're watching us on Rumble. And I think we put out a video from the Carluccio race, too, that actually shows visually where the total started going down, where it went up. Okay, so here's the total right now. And there it is by county, the main counties right now. But again, all those are over 95%, but they refuse to call it because of Cambria and Cameron counties, which are both red counties, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. They're both red counties.
Yeah, they're very red counties. So interesting. But I think Vico put in the chat, Joe, I don't know if you can see it. What I was looking for is although it's getting, the more votes they count, the less it is looking so striking. Like, how did they fudge this? So that, because the last time I looked at this, 2020 was like way up, or my numbers, maybe I just can't see. Is there a huge discrepancy?
I could probably zoom in somehow here, but these are the Pennsylvania election results going back to 2008. And you can see, from 2008 to 16, the Democrats saw a pretty clear decline. Republicans have seen an increasing trend there. What's really interesting here, in my opinion, first off, the Republican numbers in 2020 and 2024 are pretty similar. The biggest jump was between 2016 and 2020 for Republicans, or even 2012 to 16. And so, I know there were a lot of get out the vote efforts, and kudos to everyone that did that. But the main deciding factor here was cutting into the fraud that occurred. So you can see how the Democrat vote kind of dropped, although I'd argue probably still there is fraud in the totals here. What's really interesting, if you look at this as well, you can actually see it almost looks like in 2020, Trump and Biden's numbers are totally flipped. And if you just in your head, you mentally flip them, you'll see like that's really close to the numbers in 2024, right? And so I have this, I just wanted to share. You can kind of see the Republican trend in Pennsylvania has been increasing ever since our low point in 2008. So that makes a lot of sense that, it would have gone to him in 2020 and also in 2024. I have one other thing as well, and this is nationally, which I will say I have seen a ton of people sharing this, so I don't want to take credit for it, but I want to share it because I think it's really good here.
Nikki's saying, well, Harris got on the ballot without a single vote. Isn't that the truth? I wonder why her base didn't want her. She wasn't elected.
She was not even a top 5 choice when she was in the primary. So, that's how you install a regime, right? I have one other slide. I don't know if Joel, you can put that up, or Tony. Okay, that perfect.
There we go.
Yeah. So again, don't want to take credit for this. I saw it on Twitter and a bunch of other sources. But this is the national trend here of presidential elections going back to 2012 as well. And you can see the Democrat numbers. If you just ignore 2020, it's like, okay, that's a pretty consistent average. They're hovering between, let's be generous, 65 and 70 million. You can see the Republican numbers are going back up. And that makes sense because as a country, Bush and the war in the Middle East, everybody kind of abandoned ship after 2 terms, and Obama with his messages of hope. And, initially a lot of people did cross the political aisle and vote for him. So you can see the recovery from that. So the Republican numbers make sense. And this was actually made, I want to say it was like the night of the election or the day after. I didn't make this, so I didn't update this either. But the numbers in 2024 are actually going to come in line with 2020 for Republicans. They're going to be almost identical. I've seen
this is the one I was talking about, Vico. Like, where did all those votes go?
I've seen with this on like Twitter and stuff a couple of times, people were saying that the religious leaders are all getting together because they think that the rapture may have happened, because there's like 20 million missing Democrats now. So, you got to laugh or you'll go crazy sometimes looking at this stuff. But what has been kind of like a blessing in disguise is because the numbers this election follow that trend, that well-established trend. The bellwether counties went to the victor, unlike in 2020, where Trump won 7 out of the 8, I think it was. And somehow Biden ended up winning, which is fairly unprecedented. All those indicators, right? We can now look at it with a fresh set of eyes and go, you know what? I actually am starting to believe something was up with that election. Maybe you were on the fence. Maybe you were one of those people that just wanted to look forward, move forward. Well, this is a pretty insane bar chart when you see all the additional votes that showed up or just materialized out of thin air in 2020 for the Democrats. So, yeah, I know you had mentioned this earlier. I didn't have it handy enough at the time, but I wanted to throw that up there as well.
Totally. I should have sent it to Joel. I apologize. And I haven't even posted or shared this because I didn't verify it. Like Vico was saying, it's not any of our work. So I was waiting for the election numbers to really shake out and get a little bit more. We know some states are still counting, Arizona. Let's wait and see really before we start pounding the pavement with this. But if it ends up looking at all like it does now without actually evening out, I think that's going to be the real eye opener. I think I even heard someone say Joe Rogan is already starting to ask questions about like, okay, so what the heck happened in 2020? Yeah. And I'm hoping that at some point we can get our canvassing efforts in front of these people that are asking questions, because even though it doesn't tell you the answer necessarily, it is more proof to back up the fact that 2020 was not to be trusted. We had every right to question the outcome of the election. Right. And yet, like Aaron said earlier, we were labeled as lunatic election deniers for it. And now people are seeing that it really was the case, that we had every right to ask some questions. A couple more things and then we'll wind down. I know we're going over an hour. Act 88. I know, Vico, we talked a little bit about that. We really believe that, or especially Vico and Karen believe that Act 88 did contribute to mitigating some of the cheat and not allowing them to dump ballots. If you guys want to talk a little bit about how that came about. Yeah. I remember it, but I don't remember exactly how because I remember not being excited about it because it didn't eliminate Zuckerbucks, but like it kind of did.
Yeah. So there were a lot of different nuggets in Act 88. I think I mentioned it earlier, like our goal is like for there not to be fraud. Our goal is for the voter rolls to be completely clean. But the reality is like we need them to be working well enough that it overcomes the fraud. So we'll always work towards that perfect piece of legislation or that amendment or whatever it is. But sometimes it's, you get what you're given. And so Act 88 was like that. And I'm going to touch on the reporting and the counting piece of it. And then we can maybe talk about the funding side of things as well. But I think it's fairly significant. In 2020, we saw Philadelphia, and I think maybe another county or two, stop their counting. They stopped counting mail ballots when they saw Trump was up by 500 or 8,000 votes or something like that. They stopped because they needed to regroup and I believe manufacture and find the ballots they needed. And so we saw videos out of Georgia. We saw videos from other states. They were very restrictive with the access and the videos we were able to get in Pennsylvania, including things like cast vote records. They denied that effort as well. But it gave them the time needed. Once they knew the numbers they needed to overcome, they were able to manufacture the correct number of ballots. So if you like try to position yourself from like a nefarious perspective of like, I am going to cheat in this election. I am going to, as a county or as an official, inject ballots to get my candidate across the line. And it isn't necessarily every race, right? Someone running for dog catcher might be really good friends with this guy who shouldn't be in a position of power or whoever. And so you make your best guess going into an election of like, okay, polling showing this, I'm thinking that, I'm seeing this. I think in order for this steal to be realistic, I can add this many votes. And the perception of what you're doing and also the voter data itself are your two upper boundaries. You can't have more ballots than you have people that can cast the ballots. And you can't have a steal that is so obvious that people are all going to revolt, right? So if like a race goes 100% for somebody and every other race doesn't, you're going to start to think like something is wrong with that race, and you're going to revolt or you're going to push back or something. And so they're working within these boundaries. So they try to figure out ahead of time, if you're a bad guy, you're a bad actor, a ballot stuffer, whoever, what they can do. And they put it in place thinking, all right, that should be good enough. And in 2020, it wasn't good enough. People were pissed because of COVID and everything else. And they came out to vote, much higher numbers than they were expecting. And so because of this, a lot of these big counties like Philadelphia had to stop counting to figure out how to get to the numbers they needed in order to flip the state. And so Act 88 forced the counties who are receiving funding from the state, which I think all but like 2 counties are receiving this special funding. It forces them to count continuously until they're finished counting the mail ballots. So you can't just say, you know what, water main break, everyone out, and then go ahead and grab the extra bags of ballots you have under your desks like they did in Georgia. So you can no longer do that. That's huge. And in my opinion, I was watching several different sources of election reporting on Tuesday. Some of the more central or left-leaning ones kept referencing Philadelphia. Can Philadelphia, find the 200,000 mail-in ballots? There are 200,000 uncounted ballots for Kamala from Philadelphia. They kept saying this because they were expecting it again. But a lot of them don't realize the nuance of these restrictions that were put into place in 2021 through Act 88, which forces them to do that. And it also changes the reporting requirements. So I am getting, and anyone in the state can get a daily snapshot of the mail ballots now. So you know who's requested it by county and who's returned it. So on election day, I got 3 updates. I got the morning, I got noon, and I got 7 p.m. So we have a pretty clear idea going in what the maximum number of returned ballots could be. So that's a second thing where we know because Act 88 also required reporting requirements on the voter registration as well, we know what the maximum number of ballots that could come in could be. So if you need 500,000 ballots, you only send out 100,000, guess what? The public and everyone else knows what your upper limit is now. You can't mess with that anymore. And so I think those 2 things were pivotal this election cycle because it prevented, once they saw the numbers coming in, Philadelphia didn't have enough of a credit line to be able to pull from, and they didn't have the time to manufacture more votes because they had to count continuously. So I honestly think that is more significant for this past election in Pennsylvania than any other effort. Don't want to downplay the get out the vote stuff. That's critical every election cycle. It was big in 2020, but it wasn't enough because of the cheating. This helped to minimize that cheating. It helped to shave enough of the fraud off that natural turnout could overtake the rest. And so, registering people, getting people out to vote, knocking on doors, getting people to switch parties, getting people who wouldn't vote to vote somehow. Like I just saw something, I don't know if it's true or if it's a little exaggeration, but Doug Mastriano got 10,000 Amish people to the polls. He hired 300 drivers. I just read that earlier today. Whether that's a little exaggerated or not, all of this stuff helps. But at the end of the day, we need transparency and we need restrictions. So that way you can't just, you can't say, all right, potty break, and you're playing Monopoly and come back with a couple Monopoly hundreds in your pocket, right? You just can't do that anymore. So those 2 things were quite significant, in my opinion, for Act 88. There was also some changes with how funding was handled to kind of push out these third parties like Mark Zuckerberg's group, who, if you remember back in 2020, he was allowed to come in with a ton of money and set up these satellite voting stations, if I remember correctly, that allowed basically a non-governmental entity to handle mail ballot requests, registrations, and receiving mail ballots, which is insane that was even ever considered. So it banned that. You can't have you can't take third party money and allow them to run parts of the election, something like that. I studied more on the reporting side of things because that was more data oriented, but I really think that the Act 88 stuff made an impact in this election cycle where the natural turnout was able to overcome the fraud that they were allowed to carry out.
Thank you for that explanation, Vico, because I just remember at the time wanting the sun, the moon, and the stars. And I think around the time that they passed that, we were still so ticked that we lost all of our efforts for the audit, that because there was like a loophole in there for the state to somehow still get some funding, and it didn't have like every safeguard that we had wanted in it, I was livid. And I was just like, ooh. But looking back, I think that Vico gives that very good explanation. Looking back, we are thankful that the Senate was able to get that passed before the midterms. I think that was passed right before the midterms in 2022. So that, it carried us through to today, just like what Vico is saying, the voter registrations, the get out the vote efforts, chasing mail ballots, all of that could be effective, because if we didn't have those measures in place, I heard that Philadelphia, it was midnight and they were, I don't know if this is true. I'm not able to get actual eyes on it to confirm it or not, but we were getting reports that there were trucks pulling up headed to Philadelphia with tens of thousands of more ballots. Did you guys, any truth?
I saw video of it, but I don't know if it's true. But go ahead.
Yeah, I heard as well. And I think it may have been Patrick Byrne on Twitter, just to give credit where credit's due. I think he actually was tracking some of those trucks days before the election. They came from a centralized location on the West Coast. And it doesn't surprise me that we had reports on the ground where there's this semi truck again, like, in 2020, we had the semi truck with 100,000 ballots. It shows up again. I just don't think they could possibly integrate them given the changes and given the massive amount of oversight, right? You're not going to be able to cheat if people are watching you. And so I just don't think they could figure out a way to get those in.
And there were so many. The other thing that I will say that we take credit for is how many eyes were on the process from poll watching all over the state, not just where I was in Allegheny County focusing. And I see some of my watchers in the chat. Carl, thank you so much. Carl and Barb are like seeing each other for the first time probably, and like fist bumping on the, virtual fist bump. I will announce this, put December 13th, mark that on your calendar. If you're an election integrity activist in Pennsylvania, we're going to have a holiday celebration, celebrate our victory.
You're coming out. I don't care.
I was just going to say,
you're coming out.
Vico, you're bringing the dog. You're staying with me. He doesn't have to go to a kennel. Just bring the dog. You're coming. We have to celebrate. We don't get much FaceTime because Vico's on the eastern side of the state and we're on the western side. And we have kids and he has a dog. And so every time there's a get together, it's never easy. But to those out there watching, December 13th, put it on your calendar, plan to celebrate with us. It's going to be a great time. We're going to bring in a lot of the people that supported us, big national figures that gave us a platform and a voice and helped us at some point along the way. There's a ton of them. We're going to try to get as many of them together as possible because, like I said, we've been our faces have been getting beat in pretty bad, and it feels kind of good to actually get a win. And I think in order for us to be able to keep going, we need to just take a breather and celebrate this win together so that we can look forward to the next battle. I know in Pennsylvania 2025, I was just thinking, maybe we'll get a breather, but not really, because 2025, guess what positions are up statewide? Judges of elections.
That's right. Not even that, Tony. We also have Supreme Court justice retention races in 25.
I didn't see that.
3.
So we have a chance to save the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Oh my gosh. Which is where, by the way, for updates on my defamation suit with Josh Shapiro, it is being appealed to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which I'm under no grand illusions that it's going to go anywhere for that. But thankfully, the attorneys were willing to appeal it, because I don't doubt that as the governor, his thumb is on the scale. And every time we tried to file it in the court, they kept saying, you didn't file it properly. There was something. So none of the evidence from Shapiro slandering me before his run for governor has gotten in front of a judge at all. And if the state Supreme Court upholds that, he will have gotten away with just slandering a private citizen during his run for governor. So there's that. But we'll see. Maybe when he tries to run for president, we'll bring that stuff up so they can see that he is unfit. We should not have somebody running anything that is willing to throw their own constituents under the bus for their own political gain. And I'm not the only one who starts here.
Interject real quick. One of the other things, I think, like Tony said, we had eyes everywhere. And I want her to talk about what happened in Allegheny County. But I think the other thing is this voter registration scheme that Commissioner Josh Parsons kind of was the first one to come out that uncovered this. This was in at least 6 different counties. And it's it seems like it's all going back to this corporation in Arizona called Field and Media Corporation. And ironically enough, the CEO is connected to the Maricopa County Recorder's Court. So it's really interesting how all this is kind of connected. But I think that's something that in 2020 we didn't have because people weren't paying attention to the stuff. And so now, multiple counties, at least 6 that we're aware of, there could be more, that have noticed the last day to register, which was October 21st, people brought in multiple thousands of registrations that all had bogus addresses and weird names, and they all had the same handwriting and things like that. So I think it's really important that we kind of give credit to that too, because that could have inflated our voter rolls even more than they already are. And again, like Vico said, it didn't give them a chance to have that pot of extra names they can choose from. Well, if you've got 6 different counties with 2,000 extra registrations, that's, that could change. It's actually the McCormick and Casey race going on right now. So I think that's another thing that we have to give credit where credit is due. And, the DAs are investigating. I can't wait. Commissioner Josh Parsons from Lancaster just posted today. He's excited to see, what they've really uncovered because he had told other counties to be aware. And so I do think that's something that, I'm looking forward to over the next few weeks to see what these investigators have come up with, because I do think that's something that potentially could have happened also in 2020 that none of us were aware of. But, one of the other things, like Tony said, this poll watcher incentive that was across the state, but Tony really did do a ton of work in Allegheny County. And I want her to talk about that because she deserves all the credit for that. She busted her rear end.
Well, I don't know about you guys. I talked about this in our Twitter spaces yesterday, because of all the stuff that Vico has shared with you guys and we've uncovered, we're very suspicious of this whole early voting, chase mail-in ballots, because we know that what they can do. And so when the Trump campaign kind of switched to that whole messaging, we were all kind of like, oh, no, what do we do? You don't want to call it out and cause all kind of infighting and division. We got to stay on the same side. It was 2 months from the election. And I found myself just throwing my hands up at night praying, like, from an audit the vote perspective, what do I do? What do I do? And I felt on my heart say, go get poll watchers in Allegheny County, because Allegheny County has so many Republican registrations and it's so big that if they can't steal Allegheny, they can't take the whole state. There's not enough votes statewide for them to take it. So I just laser locked on getting poll watchers there. We ended up with 65 poll watchers in the city of Pittsburgh that did catch shenanigans on election day. I learned a ton about what you can and cannot do at the polling place, even down to, I didn't know this. Did you guys know that as a voter, I can wear a Trump shirt if I'm just a voter going in to cast my ballot? It's the workers and the watchers that aren't allowed to wear the political. I didn't know that. I thought nobody was allowed. So I was dressed like semi-neutral that day because I had to go vote. And I was like, I don't want to get like electioneering violation. So learned a ton, and we were able to triage stuff on the ground and send the poll watchers the statutes when they would message us and say, here's what's going on. They're telling me I can't have a registered voter list. They're telling me I can't look at the machine count. And we were able to send them the statute and say, no, here it is. Show this to the judge of elections. And it mitigated and stopped a lot of stuff. And many of our poll watchers ended up having great relationships with people at the end of the day that were a little sketchy when they went in, because they were helpful. They realized they were there just for oversight. I had them trained and ready to say, listen, you tell the judge of elections that you're there because you want to leave and reassure the public that where you were, there were no shenanigans. We want to reassure people that everything is being done above board. And so when they did that and the days went on, despite we've had some rocky starts to the morning, my phone rang off the hook from about 6 to 7:30. But by the time we got everybody kind of settled in, then it sort of slowed down. And then we didn't start having more issues until the middle of the afternoon when the electioneering voter protection fund started. The folks with the lanyards around their necks that say voter protection, they are Democrats that are, I don't even know if they're credentialed poll watchers or what they are, but they pose as these very official looking folks. And we found one of them in a specific precinct of Allegheny who was yelling in the polling location, everybody here's voting Democrat, right? And that is like huge no. Is electioneering like federal offense? Does anyone, is that, like, I didn't realize how big of a deal that was. That's like really bad.
It's bad.
So
I think it potentially can be. I don't know.
I think, Vico, correct me, they can use those things to challenge elections when they see that. If you were electioneering, if you were inside a poll trying to persuade people, I think that's grounds to contest the election, regardless of what the numbers look like. I think. because when I started reporting that, everybody that heard it was like, "Ooh," including the RNC. The young kid that answered the phone at the RNC was like, "Oh, that's bad." Okay. But reporting it with less than 30 minutes later, then we started hearing that they were being told to take the lanyards off their necks. So maybe next cycle we won't see these voter protection, whatever they are. I don't even know if they're legitimate. Are they credentialed poll watchers? Does anyone know? I don't know.
I don't think they were. I think that was the problem, that they weren't. But speaking of the RNC, Tony, I do want to give them credit too, because, you know, they were ready in the morning when poll watchers in Allegheny and Philly, they weren't even allowed in the polls in the morning. So I am going to give them credit for that, because they did kind of jump on it. And then when Center County in the evening, they wanted to stop counting, they called them and threatened a lawsuit too. So yes, I know there's issues, and the RNC isn't always great, but I will give them credit for being able to step up and actually being on top of things like that they weren't in 2020.
Completely. They really were. And they responded much quicker. But we did have to get on the horn all day. I spent, Karen and I both, all day on the phone, calling the election office, calling the RNC. I ended up submitting a report. Catherine Engelbrecht helped me understand the process of reporting this to the State Department, official complaint for the electioneering issue, making sure that we had crossed every barrier to get it reported, so that after the fact, if we needed to chase something down, at least there was a thread to pull at. Whereas in 2020, since like Karen, I think, mentioned, none of us knew what the heck was going on. And all we saw were people being sent to the polls, told they already voted, and them saying, "But I didn't vote," not knowing what to do. Some of them casting provisional ballots, but in some cases being turned away, not realizing that they could have filled out a police report for identity theft. Because if someone in fact did request a ballot for them and vote on their behalf, that's exactly what that is. Not only is it voter fraud, you stole somebody's identity. And not knowing that, there was no trace of it and no way to investigate. So all these county commissioners and GOP chairs that were telling us, "Well, give me some evidence." Yeah, I don't see any evidence. It's because we didn't have something on a silver platter like a police report where we could say, "Here, go chase this down." And as much as I think in some ways that was them cowarding out, not wanting to take responsibility to look into the things we brought them, we made sure we crossed that T this time around and had all of that stuff documented. I still have a stack this big that I need to go through and make sure that we document all of it. We're very thankful that I beat down enough doors to get a donor, so we're going to be able to pay the poll watchers that requested it. A lot of them volunteered their time, said, "No, I don't want paid. Actually, donate this to audit the vote. You guys can have it. You're going to need it for the battle ahead," which we really appreciate. So thank you. Vico, I'm looking at this electioneering. What is this day?
You had asked about what the electioneering laws are by state. So I just shared, I don't know, it's not super fancy if we wanted to share it on screen, but it explains the different requirements by state. Basically, all states have some sort of prohibition on electioneering at polling places, but it varies from state to state because it's state law typically that implements it.
Cool.
So yeah, that's a handy little cheat sheet there. Most people are only ever going to need to know the state that they're in. But if you're curious about like how Pennsylvania stacks up against other states, this might be a fun thing for people to look at and play with. But yeah, I mean, it's a critically important function. And I think, moving forward, as we learn these different things to look for and people are trained and they start to know these things instinctively, it becomes a lot easier. And you also, if you're at the same polling location, you start to get to know the other people there. So it doesn't start off kind of on the wrong foot or icy. You kind of are like, "Oh, hey, Joe or Jane or whoever," and you kind of build up that back and forth a little bit. So I think it's a phenomenal job. I also think getting them the up-to-date data the day of the election was probably helpful. I guess it was technically the day before the election. But that's another thing that I think there's some room to improve. Just, GOP or RNC or whoever, even the Department of State, being able to give like day of poll books that reflect people that did return a ballot or not. I think that's crucially important. E-poll books are awful. They're very easy to cheat with. Don't do that. Stick with the paper poll books like we have in Pennsylvania. And I think that's going to go a really long way.
I do in some counties. So this is good to note. If you're in a county that doesn't have electronic poll books, they're probably being pitched it to the county commissioners by one of the sales reps from these companies. Do not let them get those. Karen single-handedly kept them out of Westmoreland because we pitched a fit when her commissioner was looking at them, and he got us on the phone with the vendor. This was summer of 2021, and go figure, Westmoreland does not have electronic poll books. I know Allegheny's looking at them, but we can keep them out with our activist efforts on the ground. Sorry, Vico,
So
keep going.
yeah, think of an electronic poll book. When we canvassed, we had instances where somebody said, "Oh, my son didn't vote. He never registered. He's disabled. He's totally dependent." And we contacted the poll. The poll said he doesn't have a signature in the book. And we were able to uncover that someone cast a vote, or assigned a vote, probably is more accurate, in his name. There wasn't anything in the poll book. But the e-poll books are particularly disturbing. Not only does it connect to the internet, so therefore it's vulnerable to any form of cyber attack you can imagine, but the signatures are digital. And so what that means is there's a digital signature on file, and you sign digitally. So if you were a bad guy, if you were a foreign state or a black hat hacker or whoever, you would be able to add the digital signature on file where the fresh signature should be. So it would be a match to what's expected. So it's incredibly easy to manipulate. And let's say you do manipulate, you add the vote to John Doe, and John Doe's parent says, "Oh, he can't get there to vote by himself." And if the bad actor still has access to these systems, he can just go and move that signature to the next person who didn't show up to vote. So it isn't a permanent record at all. As soon as we start to play with these digital systems, because we know that they're capable of not having checks and balances, and we know that any digital system is capable of being exploited, it doesn't create the record that's necessary under our statutes to identify who actually came out to vote. And so there are a dozen other reasons I could go into about why they're really nefarious. I know we were testing them in Montgomery County. We no longer have them. I thought it was because, and I thought this was a statewide thing, I thought it was because we got rid of the no ink registration system. That deal fell apart after 2 years of delays, where they were going to revamp the score system. So I'm not sure if any counties are currently still using the e-poll books or not. I'd be curious if anyone watching, if your county is, just put it in the chat. But they're quite nefarious. Other states have moved to them, and I can't say enough bad things about them. So I'm just going to stop.
That's okay. Yeah, stick in the chat if you. I thought that Berks County was still using them. The places that had purchased them, I think Venango was like a little one that had them. I didn't know that. Maybe they did. Thank God. That would be amazing if they did. But just know that they're coming. Those companies make tons of money. They have good sales reps that are reaching out to the county commissioners, which is exactly what happened with our machines. That's how they were all sold a bill of goods. These guys know how to sell. They went in and said, "We're going to make your job 10 times easier. It's going to be smoother, more accurate, and you need to buy this fancy machine." Come to find out, they're made in Venezuela and designed to steal elections. So sales rep doesn't mention that part. We'll wrap things up here because we've been talking for a while there. Joel, if you want to queue up some of the pictures from the Team Red event and just show, the Allegheny County, MJ Costello and Tony G's Team Red event. Tony G was a poll watcher for me as well. Speaking of things that went a little awry, and Vico, I didn't get a chance to tell you this yet. I think you'll like it. Your records that you gave me to give to the poll watchers to have the registered voter list were more accurate than what the poll workers in Allegheny County had. I don't know when they printed their poll books, but they had to pick them up, I think, several days before you even pulled the records for me. And so Tony G had an instance at his particular poll where he was watching where somebody was not in their book, but they were on his list. And so the workers ended up being like, "Where did you get that? It's more accurate than ours."
That's amazing.
There he is. Oh, so appropriate. Love that man. I don't care, even though he's incredibly inappropriate. Hopefully no children are watching. Karen, yours are in bed. Either way, oh my gosh. MJ Costello, she had a barn burner of a celebration. Of course, she is mad crazy Trumper. She is also, by the way, if you saw the viral video, Vic, I don't know if you know this, the viral video of the liberal lady screaming at a Ring doorbell because there she is, my girl, because she had a Trump signs. Heaven forbid she's in a very liberal area of Pennsylvania where she lives that wasn't always as crazy as they are today. And she has the guts to put out her Trump signs. Oh, look at that. Jesus, 2024. And crazy liberal lunatic lady gets on her porch and starts screaming at a Ring doorbell. How could you be voting for him? And we didn't even know that it went viral during the day. And we didn't find out till later that night that it was her house of all places. My husband here, you can't make this up. My husband installed the Ring doorbell for her like 6 months ago.
Hey, Tony, so I talked to her and she said she had cheese and crackers on her porch with a apology note the other day.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
I never act like that. I'm so sorry. She didn't sign it, but apparently like she did say she was sorry.
Oh,
that's good.
Yeah.
That is good. Oh, I'm a sucker. My people love her. So my next door neighbor had a Harris Walls sign in there. They're relatively new to the neighborhood. When I say relatively new, I mean like less than 5 years. So we haven't gotten to know them at all, but they put a Harris Walls sign in. And so my husband, being the jerk that he can be about politics, goes and gets a monstrous Trump sign and puts it right in front of their Harris Wall sign. Happens to be in their driveway because we do actually own a piece of their driveway. We have an easement that is ours. And he just thought, just stick it to them. We'll put this giant Trump sign right in front of theirs. And we never saw them or cross paths or even got to exchange eyeballs and see like what their reaction was. But they took their Harris Wall sign down like the next day, like before her concession speech, that sign was down. So I have really felt like I should write them a card and just be like, look, we're neighbors. We love you. If you need anything, it's okay. You voted for the communist. We can still be neighbors. It's all right. By the same token, I was thinking, so help me, she wins and we start starving. You people aren't getting any help. You voted for this. Oh my gosh. Karen has put in the chat, America, is this good about Carrie Lake?
Well, it's interesting because I just saw this, and at first I was really skeptic until I actually saw there's actually a physical picture of this. But what's interesting is that apparently Maricopa County had 292,000, of which 200,000 returned a ballot. But then Pima County had 60,000, of which 108,000 returned a ballot. So that's 178% return rate.
Insane.
But make it make sense. Everything's fine.
Make it make sense. That's what I'm really looking forward to. Vico getting some rest and eventually doing a deep dive into the data in the counties like he does and showing really what the heck happened. So we know, the turnout, how did the turnout and the ballot chasing compare to the stop of the steal? So we will definitely have I'm doing my amateur eyes with my Excel. I'm trying to look at it a little bit and I'm already seeing things that are kind of like, well, make this make sense. We got a lot of questions about this. PC free 1776. Yeah, my husband, he knows how to be a jerk. In fact, his liberal sister, he got into an argument with the day after the election on Facebook because he just had to comment on something of hers. Brother and sister, they're on Facebook. Like, are you guys 10 and 12 again? Really? Can't you just call her? No, they had to fight on Facebook. She's a liberal and he's not. Glad to see it. Nikki, good to see you. Erie County, praise the Lord. Erie County wasn't a disaster because that could have been so ugly with their mail-in ballot mix up the last 2 weeks before the election. Carl, we still have Harris signs up. I still see Harris signs up too. I'll let you guys share some last minute thoughts, just funny stories for me. My youngest, who's 7, who briefly popped in here earlier when she was little and she would play games and somebody would lose, she would win. She would go, you lose. That was like her, little kids are very competitive usually and they scream and cry when they lose. You have to kind of teach kids how to not be sore losers. She's still working on that one. But something we find really cute is now when we're in the car and she sees a Harris Wall sign, she goes, you lose. She's 7. So I love it. I'm letting her do it. I don't care. So closing thoughts. Joel says he has something to play for us to end the show, but I'll give the floor to you guys to kind of give some closing thoughts, parting thoughts.
I just think that, yes, we're going to take the win and yes, we're excited, but our work has just started really. I probably could speak for you too, definitely for myself. We would welcome if somebody really wanted to look at this election as well. And I'm going to caveat that and say, well, if we're going to do this, let's do 2020 as well. But we understand that, yes, we can take a little bit of time to celebrate, but we really feel like our work has just really started to begin. And we know going forward, there's a lot of work to do in a lot of different areas. I personally will be doing a lot of hand counting classes next year, and we'll be advocating for that very, very much so within our legislature. And so, keep an eye on that. But it's just beginning, guys. And if you have not gotten involved with us this year, please go to our website, Audit the Vote PA, click on that Get Involved tab. You can get involved. If you can't do, the physical work, please give us donations so that we can continue doing what we're doing, because unfortunately, this stuff isn't free. I wish it was. So thank you guys for all of your support. We could not do what we do without you. And we thank you so, so much. So
don't forget Christmas time, mypillow.com, lots of good stuff. Shameless plug, not really shameless. This is a success story. I'm going to have Hallie, if I can get her on video saying this. My 7-year-old daughter spent 2 years coming in our bedroom every night in the middle of the night. We could not get any privacy and we didn't know why. And finally, she started telling us her bed was uncomfortable. And when she had one of her cousins sleep over who started saying the same thing, we thought she was just one of those kid things, like whatever. The cousin said the same thing. I went onto My Pillow. I purchased one of his mattress toppers. And when I tell you, my husband at first was like, how much did you pay for this? Even with our promo code, the stuff is, depending on what you're used to spending on bedding and towels, it might be expensive. It might not be. But for us, it was a little more than we would normally spend. So it was $100 for this mattress pad cover. And my husband's like, yeah, $100. I'm like, you watch, because if this thing works, this is gonna be the best $100 we ever spent, because we'll get our bedroom back. And guess what? She hasn't come in our room since the first night we put that sucker on her bed. Yes. Needless to say, he is no longer complaining when I go buy stuff on My Pillow. So support Mike Lindell, support all of us in this cause. mypillow.com, promo code ATVPA. You'll get a discount, we'll get a donation, and you'll get an amazing product that just might change your life. Changed our life.
I started a hashtag. Speaking of Mike, I started a hashtag Medal for Mike, because there's a lot going around about people who should get the Medal of Freedom. And you want to talk about who deserves the Medal of Freedom, it's Mike Lindell. He has given up so much. And I know this is a shameless plug for him, but he really has. He has given up literally everything for this cause. And so I started a hashtag on X, Medal for Mike, because I truly was the Medal of Freedom. And if President Trump decides to do an election integrity task force, that needs to be the first person that he reaches out to. So.
Oh my gosh, for real, regardless of Lindell's missteps and us thinking things were going to come to pass that maybe didn't. You cannot argue. Nobody's heart is in a better place than that man. And nobody put more on the line than he did. He spent his entire fortune, could have gone bankrupt. Praise God, Trump won. And hopefully we'll get federal regulations to go down so Mike can rebuild his companies and kind of regain some of what he's lost. But he laid it all on the line, and nobody has done more for this cause than him. So I echo what Karen says. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Actually, Joel, if you'll put this up, just a fun little play on donations that I did. Put a new donation page, just having some fun the other day. If you're able to support us with a reoccurring monthly donation and help pay our yearly expenses, our website stuff, our Zoom account, our Canva account, just all the basic things, even the StreamYard account. I think right now we upgraded to get some extra stuff so we could stream on multiple platforms. And even it is like $80 to $100 a month. Just all those little things. Every little bit helps, whether you can do $5 a month, or if Joel can share that screen and put up some of the fun. I think I did like the comeback if you want to give $47, remembering the steal if you want to give $45, tribute to 2020, give $20.20, or shout out to the future, $20.24 to help us remember 2024. It's just a fun little thing with his fist. Yes. Now you will have to scroll up on that, Joel. You will have to click the thing that says one-time donation and make it a monthly recurring donation to make it come out every month, or you can do one time, whatever fits your budget. That's what I did. I was just having some fun late one night. The Steal 2020, the comeback. I love that picture of him. Love it. The comeback, the future, and never forget 45, 47. I just had some fun. So Vico, parting thoughts, and then we'll head out for the night and get some sleep.
Yeah. Oh, I love the idea here. This is the first time I'm seeing it. So really, really good idea. I love the different like little hashtags, and Karen, I love medal for Mike. I think that's, of all the people, Mike is up there. There are a couple of big names. I'd also throw Kurt Olson as well. Kurt and Mike have worked together so much. and a handful of others. I could probably ramble off a dozen easily of just the most patriotic, selfless people that have given so much over the last 4 years. Mike, especially with the holidays coming up, if you need another mattress topper or a beach towel, or the pillows are obviously very comfy, but so are the slippers. There's so many different options on there. Definitely think about maybe getting a few gifts for people. That all helps Mike. Mike has poured a tremendous amount of his own money and just so much time into this effort. We would not be as far as we are without Mike. He, Mike is the kind of person that, God tapped on the shoulder a while ago and has used Mike to really elevate this issue. So many people have come to Mike with what they found, and Mike treats everyone the same. He hears you out. He looks at the validity of it. He looks at the possibility of what it is. And then once he's convinced, once he understands what it is, he will do whatever he can to try and help you. And that's just the kind of selfless, big-hearted guy he is. I definitely think that's Medal for Mike is a great idea. I definitely would love to see that happen. It's been a long 4 years. A lot of us have been in this for longer, or at least those 4 years. Thank you to everyone that's been here. I see many people I know in the comments here. MJ, Barb, just shout out a couple of people. So many amazing people that have given so much just in Pennsylvania and at the local level. Even though there was a win, the key here moving forward is eternal vigilance. We can't go back to that, comfortable state we were in before, where we just blindly trusted things were being done properly. That's how we got into the situation we're in. There's still a lot of work to do. Countries over in Europe, they hand count same day, paper ballots. They've gotten rid of mail ballots because they're so ripe for fraud. There are countries that are in the midst of getting rid of the machines because they've exposed those to be easily exploited. There are so many different things that still need to get done in order to really restore our elections to what they're supposed to be. So, please keep in the fight. I know right now we all deserve a little rest, right? There's going to be a ton of work to do. We will look at this election. In 2020, they didn't finish publishing the reconciled numbers until February. And even then, they weren't complete. So I don't expect to necessarily have meaningful data immediately. But as soon as we have stuff, we'll want to get that out, especially if there are things that went awry that we caught. So definitely follow Audit the Vote on the social channels to be able to keep in touch with that as we find it. And I just want to say again, thank you, ladies, and thank you to everyone who's on the stream now. Everything is downstream of election integrity, all these issues that we care about. And so it all starts with our elections, which is why we need to really ensure they're transparent and trustworthy.
Awesome. All right, Joel, hit that video so we can all go get some rest and get back at this next week. Regroup, brainstorm, figure out where we're going. Excited with a breath of fresh air.
To the
So very special. Yes, we're thankful for all of you and for this movement and for finally some mercy and a reprieve and be able to move forward in a pace that doesn't feel like we're putting out a fire every day. Actually take ground and go on the offense for a little bit instead of feeling like we have to triage. Or I think honestly, Jeff O'Donnell said it best. He was my favorite comment. Now everybody in America knows what it feels like to be on an airplane that is about to crash, nose diving for the ground, and then to lift up 10 feet before it hits. That's exactly what it felt like, doesn't it? Like that's the embodiment right there. That's on the Titanic. We're going down. And at the last minute, we found enough lifeboats for everybody. And where there's still a chance. Tons of work to be done, but there's still a chance. So thank you guys for hanging with us. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Get some rest.